All right, with us is a man of the hour, has been, he's been caught up in the Eric Greitens impeachment resignation scandal. Scott Faughn, publisher of the Missouri Times, been on the show numerous times. Scott, welcome back, Big 550 KTRS.
Welcome back, but a scandal I'd rather be caught up in is how close can Tiger get that yacht to Belle Reeve?
Yeah,
I mean, that'd be, at least it'd be fun.
It's too big to work down the Mississippi River. So no bag of cash for me today.
Well, it's in the car. My bad.
All right, fair
enough. I have a lot to do this morning.
Before we go back, let's go forward. We were talking here before. Are you now officially out of the news story? There's no more Scott Faughn testimony planned for the future, right? You
know, when you're in the news business, your competitors get to decide when you're out of the news story. So right. I doubt it. I can't imagine I would be.
Right.
But in some ways, I hope not.
But you also said to me you weren't subpoenaed to testify.
Nope.
And no one ever alleged you did anything illegal, right?
Not that I ever heard.
Right. So so going forward, there's no plan for you to testify. You didn't have a lawyer there, right? I mean,
well, I don't know what you would testify for. I mean, as I understand it, the governor, it became public, signed a document with the St. Louis city attorney that said, hey, if this went to a jury, a reasonable jury could find me guilty, and I'm going to resign my office in return for you not filing this charge. And Gene Peters Baker said there wasn't enough time to investigate whatever sexual issues there were.
Right.
So I don't know what crime the governor would have that anybody would testify in.
All right, let's go back. You testified in front of the House committee on all sorts of things. You got caught in the middle of this because you dropped off money, cash money, to Al Watkins, the attorney for the husband. Why did you do that?
I went before the House without a subpoena for 3 hours. We talked about everything from decade-old traffic tickets to my selection of envelopes. I have a lot of respect for the House. I try to treat them with respect. I purchased some audio tapes from Al Watkins, attorney in Clayton. I was going to try my goal. We are writing a book about it. We're going to try to approach the person on that was recorded, not the man, but the woman,
right? And
try to see if she would be willing to tell the story she told. I thought it would be a better position if we had the tapes.
Mm-hmm.
As it turns out, I always, believe it or not, I think me and Al may have had a pretty good misunderstanding on a number of things. I think at the end of the day that I don't speak Al Watkins, and I'm not sure Al Watkins speaks the hillbilly dialect that I speak. But as it turns out, he had not the wife, but the husband had already sent the tapes out. I may believe to the Post-Dispatch, and I noted in an interview. By the time we had them, their value was not what they were before.
Right. Yeah. So were you duped?
I don't say duped. I mean, if I had to guess, looking back on it, and I've reviewed it pretty good myself, I think I didn't quite understand what he was saying, and I probably put it on myself. I don't know if duped is the right word. I would say that it's much more on me, and frankly, now the book that we're about halfway through writing probably is more valuable than it would have been. So at the end of the day, it's probably all going to work out.
Did you get all the tapes?
That I know of.
Right. So you do have in your possession more tapes that have been released? Is that safe to say?
I have been in my possession more tapes. I haven't heard anybody else publicize. I don't know what all's been released. I don't know what all is obtained by law enforcement or the House committee. And I don't know what of that they would release. So I have all the tapes that I know about. I completed our agreement. I have no idea if there are more tapes that I don't have, or there may be tapes that law enforcement has, and they just haven't made public yet.
The theory, Scott Faughn, was that some big developer, some big Greitens opponent who doesn't like him, wanted to manipulate the news to create this controversy to get him out of office, and they used you as a pawn, as a conduit, to pay off somebody to create a fake story.
Well, I think, I've heard 3 different variations of that. I think if you want to attack Scott Faughn, you use Scott Faughn as the mastermind. If you want to somehow push on and attack some special interest, the governor is always wanting to fight people. I only can think of 2 reasons why that's the case. One, the only public policy difference I knew about, well, I guess there were 2. One, Eric Greitens thought the legislature was corrupt career politicians. Mike Parson was a member of that legislature. Number two, there's tax credit developments that go on throughout the state. One is used in Missouri, in St. Louis and Kansas City. It's historic buildings to rehab them. One is LIHTC, which is used in St. Louis, but also used throughout the rest of the state in a lot of rural areas. The governor was for only continuing the urban ones. Parson was for continuing both. I guess that's why they came up with it. The only part I found disconcerting was if somebody would offer me a fact or say this is why or this is the fact or anything to actually have an intelligent conversation, I could better address it. But I guess you could make up that it was space aliens. You could make it up that it was the Cubs or whoever you want. I don't know how to refute just random speculation.
But $120,000 for you, I know you a little bit. I would be shocked and was shocked to find out you could put your hands on $120,000 cash to give to those tapes. It seems like a lot of money for those tapes.
Yeah, it does. It was funny. I would get questioned by one legislator that put $50,000 into his state rep campaign. If my book does well, which I think it will, the pre-orders are already recouping, getting close to half of that money. But what's hilarious to me is I had a state rep that put $50,000 in his campaign for a job that pays $30,000 a year. And he thought my investment was poor. I had other media outlets who literally have been bankrupt in the last 5 years questioning my judgment. I've sat in rooms. We've made some pretty good media plays. We have a knack for working hard and being fortunate. And so I guess the question will be the investment I made in myself. We'll see if it pans out or not.
Yeah. The Greitens supporters say that the husband was paid, the wife was paid to make up the story.
I think the governor was asked many times. Well, I think he said they had an affair.
Right.
So I think Greitens supporters at this point, look, I think there's some good people that still believe the governor should have stayed in office. I don't think there's anybody with any rational person that thinks the governor didn't do anything wrong. He was asked many times, even by the most friendly outlets he could be asked by, did you take the picture? And he wouldn't answer them. The Mitch continues stuff, he never answered that at all. So I guess there's always going to be people in politics, and I think it's a little bit of the nature we're in now. If you don't like the news, it's fake news. Don't believe in if any piece of news you don't like is not true. There'll always be Greitens supporters. I think he did accomplish some good things. I'm a believer the glass was mostly empty, but not completely empty.
Yeah.
Where Eric Greitens is concerned. And I think the fact that he chose to resign, the fact that he chose to sign a statement under oath that he did things that if presented to a jury, they could find him guilty. I think that makes it very hard to still be Eric Greitens as a poor, pitiful victim being picked on by powerful interests.
So take us back here for a second, Scott Faughn, publisher of the Missouri Times. If the tapes had never come out and you got access to the tapes, were you going to release them? Was the plan always for a book? Was the plan to buy the tapes and then release it as an exclusive with the Missouri Times? What was because that, again, that's a lot of money, and a book is a long play. You were going to hold on to these tapes for 6-8 months while you wrote the book?
We were hoping for 5, but yeah, I mean, look, there's a big difference here. Because we bought them, I didn't feel comfortable using them in the Missouri Times. Just because we don't pay for stories in the Missouri Times. Right. To put them in a book, then that fit what we wanted to do. My plan was I felt confident that if we handled it right and took it slow, we could, I was hoping to convince the woman to tell her story. As it turns out, she did telling her story after months of this.
Right.
But I did not put those tapes or her out there. Because I felt like there was a way to play it slowly and hopefully have her tell her story, and then that would have been I think a great book that probably would have led to all this. See, a lot of the things that you've read about Eric Greitens, I'm sure are surprising to you, and I'm sure are surprising to a lot of your listeners.
Right.
These are things that I was telling you over a beer for the last 3 years.
Right.
Not any of this surprises me. In fact, there's things in the book that haven't came out yet. That we have pretty well locked down that'll be in the book. I mean, I was not surprised by any of this. And I think that as more people kind of work through the just overwhelming amount of evidence, I used to hear people say, well, we want one more shoe to drop. Well, a Foot Locker has fell.
Right.
And I've had plenty of time to digest this, and I think others are getting there now.
What about the money, Scott Faughn? Was it for the tapes, or was it for the husband to record the wife?
No, I didn't even know any of these people existed. I had heard the rumors during the campaign season back in 2016 that there was multiple affairs. But, when you're in the business I'm in, you hear these rumors all the time about everybody.
Sure, right.
So I don't put a lot of stock into it. These seem to be pretty persistent. And so kind of whenever I got to catch my breath after special session and veto session last year and thought, okay, this is a pretty good stopping point for a book. The last 3 years in politics start with Auditor Schweik's passing and right up to now.
Right.
Obviously, the dominant personality in Missouri politics during that time was Eric Greitens. So I started going through my notes and looking into things. And as it turns out, these tapes were probably coming out regardless. It seemed to me like there was certainly a story percolating. I think Eric Greitens made no secret of his fact to seek the presidency. There's no way these stories didn't come out, but I didn't have them.
Yeah. All right. So one more. I want to ask you one more question, then we'll sort of move on from all of this. So the other theory is that, Scott Faughn, the news media wasn't going to release the story because they didn't have it. They didn't have enough confirmation, and they weren't comfortable with the tapes. And so instead, since the traditional media wasn't going to release this story, you were going to buy them through some way of putting your hands on this money, and then the story was going to come out through you because it wasn't going to come out through traditional means.
Well, I don't know that theory withstands just the basic facts of the situation. I mean, they did come out. I don't know. I would consider KMOV pretty traditional.
No, but it only came out after, it was sort of like Greitens admitted to the affair, which then was the second source, if you will.
No, I'll tell you what I think. Now this is it's a theory. I can't tell you for sure, but from my read on the depositions and what I've heard, I'm not sure the story was even going to come out KMOV until the governor's general counsel called Al Watkins and he recorded the tape and played it that afternoon. I'm not sure this story actually broke until she made that phone call and he recorded it and released it. So but that's, if those depositions are ever public, you'll be able to actually see the difference between my theory and other theories. I actually can give you a fact.
Right.
When the transcript of those depositions come out, you'll be able to read through there and see if I was right or wrong. I'm not telling you for sure I'm right. That's my sense of it. I think the bottom line is this: if you want to think that, if you want to blame someone for the exposing of clearly the most corrupt governor in the history of the state, and you want to blame Scott Faughn will take it. If you want to credit somebody with exposing the most corrupt governor in the history of the state, I'd love for you to credit me, but I'm not sure that Lauren Traeger doesn't deserve that credit at KMOV. But and I believe she got an award from the mainstream media for her investigative journalism on the topic. But if you want to blame someone, you can blame Scott Faughn. If you want to credit someone, that's fine too. I'm just not sure it's fair.
Yeah. What's your mail been running like? What's your emails been running like? What's your phone calls been running like?
Tony Messenger actually wrote a column this weekend. The actual, people that call you or will email you and write you, that's obviously wildly supportive. We do have a few folks on Facebook. The interesting part was, and Tony Messenger touched on it, everything about this governor had tons of money behind it and it was very secretive and it was usually running contrary to the public face he would put on things. The Twitter stuff was amazing that you could have that many people or Twitter accounts. I think Tony Messenger's on the right track.
With this Twitter troll that he outed,
and not just one. There was probably 100 by the end, and I think it would shock me if it wasn't related to a couple members on the governor's professional staff and a couple members on his campaign staff. I had my family followed. We had, if there's a Faustino Luciano out there, he knows a lot about where my daughter goes to school and stuff.
So they followed your kids to school? They followed you to school?
Yeah. It was, it got very aggressive. And I think the Twitter trolls and the vitriol that they have were just a manifestation of, frankly, a very corrupt, secretive, just a bunch of bad guys that now are gone.
So were you afraid for your safety?
No,
were you?
I wasn't afraid. It was harassment.
Right.
It's like the Twitter accounts. I would just assume they tweeted me as somebody that would care. But I can understand why some of the folks, when you get a death threat on Twitter, you assume it's ridiculous.
Right.
But you're making an assumption that
Right.
you can't be sure about.
Yeah. What happens now? The book's coming out. You're still writing the book?
Of course. I mean, the book's wildly more interesting now than it even would have been 5 months ago. I mean, if I would have told you the story that's going to be in that book at a Christmas party, you would have thought I was nuts.
Right.
So I guess what's more unbelievable that a publisher who's had a very good 5-year run could buy tapes, or that this governor was tying people up in his basement, and I'm going to put that in a book next fall.
Right.
I know which one I would have thought would have been more bizarre, but yeah, it's at scottfaughn.com. You can pre-order it right now.
What's the name of the book?
It's going to be While Missouri Slept. I think an important part of this is I saw people, and I think you're going to attribute some of this to Trump. They just wouldn't believe anything that didn't back up what they wanted to believe. And I think some of that is, I think Donald Trump's done some very good things.
Right.
But I think part of it is when you rip down the institutions of a state or a country, people lose sight of the ability to actually process information. We used to be a bellwether state. People would vote all across the ballot.
Right.
I'm not sure that didn't make for a better state than kind of sleepwalking monolithically and partisanly.
When's the book coming out?
Well, we hope to have it out the week before the election. That's my goal.
Oh, yeah. Nothing like pouring gasoline on the fire.
There you go.
How much is the book?
It could be $19.95. If you, speaking of the Postage Batch, if you order today, everybody that pre-orders before Labor Day, we're going to call personally and talk a little politics with. And if you pre-order today, we'll send you a signed copy of me being on the cover of the Post.
Scott Faughn, never a dull moment around your household. All right, you're going to come on the show tomorrow because what can we expect from the governor today in his speech?
I think it's going to be, speaking of the, you mentioned some of the theories of the Greitens supporters. I think he's probably not going to do tax credits or like Eco-Devo in rural Missouri this year. I think you're going to see him trying to come together and try to. I mean, it is a divided party. It gets less so every day.
Right.
And I think you're going to see he is kind of who he is. Like with Eric Greitens, I'm not sure you ever really knew who he was because I'm not sure he knew who he was. Mike Parson, you know who he is. Whether you like that or not, I think he's not going to be flashy. I think he's putting his head down and going to work. I think he's going to be pretty workmanlike. And I think you're going to see a state government that reflects probably traditional outstate Missouri values.
Yeah. Last question for you, Scott Faughn.
You bet.
And that is this. You've had a front row seat for the last 2.5 years and longer. But Tom Schweik committing suicide, the dark money, the money that tried to drive him crazy, it did. He had some mental issues, but clearly those people who were behind those ads made no bones about specifically making those ads for him, directed at him, all the way up through the Eric Greitens. Is there any reform on the way?
I think that if you look at modern-day America, there's a reason why we name bills after kids' names. We respond to tragedies. And from my catbird seat in the state of Missouri, I believe you're going to see reform. Now, dark money, there's some folks I respect that take umbrage with the term dark money. If it's truly for an issue or something, then I think that's one thing. I think you are going to see Missouri's laws change, but a lot of this comes from a federal system. The federal system is set up to operate in dark money. So to the extent we can wall off Missouri from the federal system, I think we'll be successful. To the extent we can't, I think it's going to take federal law changes.
All right, you're going to come back tomorrow and talk about the governor's speech tonight.
Absolutely. We're all looking forward to it.
Thank you, sir. Missouri, the website to order the book?
ScottFaughn.com or go to MissouriTimes.com and follow the first few weeks of the Parson administration.
Never a dull moment around here. Thanks for coming.